Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, Ohio State, Texas, college football playoff semifinals. As a college football fan, it just doesn't get better. I mean, you get two premier college football programs with two of the best rosters in all of college football going head to head, national championship berth on the line. We previewed this football game the night we found out it was going to happen. And that night was when, Texas doesn't look great, kind of gets by Arizona State. Ohio State, I mean, they look like far and away the best team in all of college football. And I don't think Texas fans would argue that. You know, the version of Ohio State that we just saw against Oregon in the Rose Bowl, that looks like a very hard team to beat. And when we did our game preview, I took Ohio State, and I took Ohio State to cover the 5.5 points. Why I'm getting on and talking about this game again is that over the last couple of days, I've listened to a lot of really smart people talk about this football game, and the way this game is getting talked about is as if Texas does not have a chance. And I think that's wild because you look at this Texas team, there are certain matchups, there are certain players that Texas has on their football team, specifically on the defensive side of the football, that can deal with guys like Jeremiah Smith and guys like Travion Henderson, guys like Quinshon Judkins. Now, I don't know if you could say that for teams like Oregon and teams like Tennessee, because you go back and watch those football games, Ohio State, they made those teams just look slow. And you look at Texas and say, you know, as much as people want to talk about Coach Sark, Arch Manning, Quinn Ewers, the reason this Texas team, at least in my opinion, is so dangerous is it is one of, if not the best defense that we see in college football. And I think they have the dudes to better match up against Ohio State than what we saw with Oregon and what we saw with Tennessee. I want to get into 5 reasons I think Texas can very well win this football game. Again, am I taking Texas in this game? No, I took Ohio State. But the way people are talking about this and saying Texas does not have a chance, I think that's wild. And I want to get into a few matchups that I do think favor Texas in this football game. Before we do, and as always, Texas fans, Ohio State fans, let it fly in the comment section. I think we all agree it's going to be a really fun football game. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's start with, really reason number one, and that is the team speed that Texas has on defense. Look, it was no secret what Ohio State did to have success against Tennessee, and it was no secret what Ohio State was going to try to do against Oregon in the Rose Bowl. And that is, hey, we're going to get our playmakers out in space, and your guys on defense just can't run with our guys. You know, kind of simple, right? You saw that work against Oregon too. Now, it was a little disappointing because it seemed like at times Oregon was not ready for some of that perimeter stuff Texas was running. But, at the end of the day, you look at Oregon and talk about, hey, that Oregon team was really good. I think we all know that. Where did they, from a personnel setting, fall short? Off ball linebacker and in the safeties in the back end. Guys like Kobe Savage, guys like Deshaun Johnson, they're not those long, rangy safeties. And then you look at the linebacker spot, as good as guys like Bryce Betcher has been, there's a gap between what Bryce Betcher is and Anthony Hill. And when Ohio State was running to the perimeter, whether in the quick game in the passing attack, whether it was the run game getting to the outside, Oregon just didn't have the team speed to get out there in space and tackle Ohio State. I think Texas does. I think it starts with one of the best linebackers in the country in Anthony Hill. If there is a linebacker that you wanted to have to match up against Ohio State, I don't know if you're taking a linebacker over Anthony Hill, because what makes Anthony Hill so special, it's his range. It's his ability to cover a lot of ground very quickly and make plays in space. That is what Ohio State is going to try to do. And I think Texas at the linebacker spot to start is certainly there. And then you look at the safety spot, and this was something that Ohio State had a lot of success against Oregon was, hey, Oregon, guys like Kobe Savage, guys like Deshaun Johnson, they're solid football players. They're good safeties at the Power 4 level. Are they elite? I think we got our answer when Ohio State played them in the Rose Bowl. Andrew Makuba, the transfer portal addition from Clemson. I don't know if there was a singular more impactful transfer that Texas brought in than him. To me, he's revolutionized this Texas secondary I mean, you look at it and say it's such a better secondary with Andrew Mukuba for a large part kind of running the ship in the back end. I think Texas has the difference makers, the Jimmies and Joes, to match up with some of the speed that Ohio State's bringing to the table. To go into number two, let's dive a little bit more into the secondary. Look, what makes Ohio State, at least in my opinion, so difficult is, yeah, they have Jeremiah Smith, who's almost impossible to take away. And if you can manage to take him away, you got to deal with Emeka Ibuka. And if you can manage to take him and Emeka Ibuka away, you got to deal with a guy like Carnell Tate. If you can do all that, can you stop the run? The amount of weapons that Ohio State has specifically in that passing attack, it becomes very difficult for any team across the country to match up and try to take away all those weapons. You look at Texas, the biggest improvement we've seen from this team. Why are they a national championship caliber team in 2025 or 2024, and they weren't in 2023? It's the secondary. You're looking at arguably the best secondary. What the stuff says in the paper is true, right? 5.5 yards per pass given up for Texas' secondary. That's number one in the country. They do two things at a high level. One, they don't give up explosive plays in the deeper third, and they come up and tackle in space. And I think the yards after the catch tackling in space is probably one of the most important conversations we have in this football game. Texas has been very good tackling on the boundary. They've only given up 1,200 yards after the catch all year, a very low number. Ohio State is going to try to get some of that quick game going and say, hey, can you tackle someone like Emeka or Jeremiah Smith in space? Texas has shown all year that they can do that. And so I look at the defense as a whole and say, I do think Texas has just that caliber of athlete to deal with all the athletes Ohio State does. And I think number three, and this is a huge talking point here, look, the biggest question mark that I had personally for Ohio State going into the college football playoffs, could this offensive line hold up? Because we saw when they lost to Michigan, that Ohio State offensive line got whipped. They did a very good job against Tennessee. They did a very good job against Oregon. I give a lot of credit to Coach Kelly and Ryan Day because they are scheming up the offense where, hey, we're not going to ask our offensive line to do as much. We're going to lean out on our playmakers on the boundary and kind of play the game out in space as opposed to the line of scrimmage on the offensive line. Can Texas's pass rush win the day? And this is, again, we just talked about the secondary. You look at the Texas pass rush. I mean, Colin Simmons as a true freshman, he's one of the best pass rushers in the country. And you look at Ohio State, how they've shuffled on the offensive line. They got an All-American guard now playing left tackle who might not necessarily be used to playing in all that space. Can Colin Simmons take advantage of a guard playing tackle here? Trey Moore on the other side. Barron Sorrell, who's quietly just been such a good player for Texas over the last couple of years. Then on the inside, we all know Ohio State's dealing with some injuries there. Guys like Broughton. Can Texas impact? And it's not necessarily just about sacks and tackles for loss. It's about getting the pocket muddy for Will Howard. When Will Howard has pressure in his face, he struggles as a quarterback. We all know that. When Ohio State can keep him clean, he looks damn good. He certainly has looked damn good the last couple of weeks. Can Texas impact Will Howard? Tennessee wasn't able to. Oregon wasn't able to. If you can take away some of the quick stuff and have really asked this Ohio State offensive line to extended pass protection, I think that puts Texas in a good spot to potentially get it going with that pass rush. Now, going to the offensive side of the football, I think probably one of the more underappreciated aspects of this Texas team is Coach Sark calling the first quarter. To me, it's weird because the narrative around this football game is Ryan Day and Coach Kelly have come out guns blazing in this playoffs with their offensive play calling. They've scripted up really good plays that work, and Ohio State has jumped on both Tennessee and jumped on Ohio State in the first quarter, or jumped on Oregon in the first quarter. Nobody's talking about Coach Sark being one of the best game scripters either. And so, that's not just I favor Ohio State in this. Even the Texas, when they struggled against Arizona State, they came out with a really nice first 15 to 10 plays they called on offense. The first quarter is going to be big. But I don't know if I'm just handing it to Ohio State because Texas, you look, Coach Sark, he's one of the best in the business at coming into a game with 10 to 15 plays that he knows he can execute and go out and work. That's going to be a big story because we haven't seen Ohio State play a tightly contested football game in the playoffs. And let's be quite frank about it. The two times we've seen Ohio State have to play close football games, Michigan, Oregon on the road, they haven't played their best when it gets tight. Can Texas kind of not just hang in there? Can they win the first quarter with what Coach Sark can dial up on offense? Last one, probably the biggest storyline. What's this offensive line look like? Sounds like Cam Williams is going to be healthy. I think for Texas fans, what's kind of been frustrating about Texas throughout the course of the year, there's been times where I look at that Texas offensive line and say, that's the best offensive line that we see in the country. There are times against Georgia in the regular season. There have even against Arizona State, I don't think was great, obviously dealing with some injuries where it hasn't looked dominant. You're going to need your offensive line, one, healthy, which it sounds like it will be. And number two, they're going to have to win the matchup against this Ohio State defensive front. This Ohio State defensive line, it's legit. I mean, it's not just the first four guys are NFL dudes. It's probably the next four too. And so you look at how Ohio State, I mean, go back to that Oregon game. They had 8 sacks and 13 tackles for a loss. Tennessee, 4 sacks, 6 TFLs. When Ohio State's defense is dominating, it starts with that front four. Can Texas figure out a way to not only keep Quinn clean in the pocket, but can you figure out a way to run the football? Because we all see when this Texas team can run the football effectively and then work off a play action, this is one of the hardest offenses to stop. I think the problem with Texas at times is they haven't run the football all that efficiently, which is, to me, it was wild to see Texas run for 300 yards against a Clemson front seven that I think is very good, and then against an Arizona State front seven that it's not bad, but it ain't great. They struggled. You're going to need your offensive line to play their best football in this football game, and I think they have the capability to do so. We've seen Texas take over games with their offensive line. Can they do it against Ohio State? Massive question mark. Look, I took Ohio State. I took them to cover inside of a touchdown, but the way we're talking about this football game, we got to start giving more respect to Texas, because if there's any team that has the personnel, the dudes to deal with Ohio State, I do think it's this Texas program. We will close it out on there. Let it fly in the comment section. Texas fans, Ohio State fans, appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.